Very much for taking the time in joining us. Of course, we move on to another US-related development, and the Committee to Protect Journalists has condemned the arrest of former CNN anchor Don Lemon and an independent journalist for their coverage of a protest against immigration raids in Minnesota. CPJ CEO Jody Ginsburg called the arrest an egregious act on the First Amendment and journalists' ability to do their work. Don Lemon faces federal charges of conspiracy to deprive rights and interfering with First Amendment rights. The arrest occurred during his reporting on a protest at a church, part of a larger demonstration against immigration raids. The CPJ warns that these arrests reflect an alarming pattern of escalating threats to press freedom in the US. Let's listen into what Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass had to say on the issue.
We have seen protesters under attack. We have seen people being snatched off our street. And now all of you are at risk. And this is just unacceptable. This assault on our democracy has got to end. And you, all journalists, play such a critical role.
Joining us now to discuss this is Matthew Verdum. He's an American journalist joining us live from Washington. Thank you very much for joining us, Matthew. Of course, a pleasure to talk to you.
Sure.
These federal charges include conspiracy to deprive rights and violating laws usually meant to protect religious worship and not journalists on assignment. Is this really about journalism here, Matthew, or is this the government weaponizing a criminal law to calm reporting?
This is about the FACE Act, which is the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, which was passed in the era of President Bill Clinton and had to do with protecting reproductive health clinics, like Planned Parenthood clinics, so that women could go in and get abortions without having to confront pro-life protesters. But it also applies to churches, to places of religious worship, so that they can't be invaded by unruly protesters. And so the question here is, was Don Lemon a legitimate journalist just covering a story, or was he an activist who went into the church and disrupted religious worship, which is forbidden under the FACE Act? And it's interesting that leftists like Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass, who you showed a clip of a moment ago, are fine when conservative pro-life protesters go to prison for years and years and years for picketing Planned Parenthood, abortion clinics. And yet, when some radical kook leftists break into a church in Minnesota and shut down religious worship, she's fine with it. She and people like her are fine with that. Now, I don't know if Don Lemon was an instigator, a co-conspirator in shutting down the religious service in Minnesota. But if he was, then he should pay the price like anyone else would under the FACE Act. And his defense is going to be that he was a legitimate journalist. But I don't know, if you're a journalist and you wander into an armed robbery and then you help them hold up the tellers, you help them carry out bags of money to their getaway car, are you an innocent bystander who's just, are you just an independent journalist who's covering the events? This is what the court is going to be, a jury is going to be asked to decide. And from what I've seen, Don Lemon seems like a guilty co-conspirator in that he went into a church wanting to shut down the service in order to make a point about ICE, because these protesters, these activists, wanted to disrupt a church service to get publicity for their crusade against federal immigration enforcement in Minnesota.
Of course, this comes at a time, though, Matthew, where tensions are very, very much high, especially in Minnesota. And of course, Don Lemon says he's going to fight these charges vigorously and thoroughly in court. That's what his lawyer has said. But what does this case signal to the world about press freedom in the United States. Obviously, the world is going to be looking at the headlines, right? They're going to say former CNN host, of course, left-leaning channel, is charged with over ICE anti-ICE protest coverage in Minnesota. How does that look in terms of First Amendment areas?
I suppose if you accept those facts at face value, it makes America look bad in terms of respecting First Amendment freedoms. But the issue here is whether he was a co-conspirator in this effort to deprive churchgoers of their right to worship peacefully. And from what I've seen, it looks like he certainly was. If he'd just gone in there with a camera and he was filming what was going on and talking to people, sure. But if he was actually taking part in the disruption, then he should pay the price under the FACE Act. So, being a journalist, you get certain leeway, you get certain protections, but it doesn't give you a get out of jail free card. It doesn't give you a license to break other laws. And if Don Lemon is successful in convincing the court or the jury that he was just there covering the events, that he wasn't a ringleader, then he will be acquitted, and he deserves to be. But I'm not sure that it's going to be that easy for him to do. Okay. People who, pro-lifers who protest abortion clinics go to prison for like 3 or 4 years for just blocking an entrance. And that's a pretty severe punishment that I've seen federal judges dish out to them. And why shouldn't people who disrupt church services get the same treatment? Okay. And a lot of people are wondering that.
Okay, Matthew, do stay with us as we move on to our next story. And the US President Donald Trump has endorsed Kevin Warsh as his next pick